everybody, it's David with No Chaser, and today's topic is kind of it's a new perspective on something that I have discussed before, and that is the subject of boredom in recovery or addiction or whatever you want to call it. Like how I've always said that boredom is one of those underrated sort of threats to people's sobriety or staying clean, because you know, when you think of like reasons to relapse or reasons to keep drinking and using, you know, it's such a damaging and significant thing to your life that you would think you would need damaging and significant sounding things to cause it. And, you know, you think about like you relapse because of a deep depression or just like high wire anxiety or struggling with trauma or PTSD or just like external events that like cause so much stress and chaos in your life. And you wouldn't think of just something like boredom as a reason to go back out and almost destroy your life again. And I'd always said that, you know, boredom is no joke. Like, boredom is a form of suffering. I think people, they put it in this separate other category of just, I don't know, like an annoyance or an irritation, but it truly is a form of suffering. Just, you know, that's one of the things, the components of that drives people in isolation, truly insane. And especially if you're in recovery or if you struggle with mental health, you know, just having your mind being able to have a loudspeaker and just you jibber jabber like as much as it wants is not a good place to be. Now, I had a couple of videos way back where I talked about boredom, and you know, I was watching some video, one of the few that weren't like cats and dogs and crazy nonsense, but it was talking about anhedonia. And anhedonia is, some people think of it as just some fancy schmancy word for, you know, not liking things. Anhedonia is when you see commercials for antidepressants or side effects, and it just may lose pleasure in things, or may, you know, or if they talk about depression, you know, may lose the capacity to enjoy things, and you know, that's really what it's supposed to be categorized at. You know, some call it, kind of the more popular phrase for it is pleasure deafness. You know, I would say, at least for the addict or the alcoholic, anhedonia is like pleasure blindness. Like just everything is cut out and you can't find your way around. Not only finding pleasure at all, but you don't know where to go. And that's the funny thing when I think about sometimes where I considered myself bored, and this may seem like stupid semantic stuff, but just hear me out, where it may not have truly been boredom, but it was anhedonia. I mean, I think it's important to like separate those two things and understand them, because, you know, I considered this a few times whenever I talk about boredom or I talk about the struggle of staying sober, where I would just be like, you know, I was just so bored. And the idea usually is that boredom is something you feel when you're doing something or you're in a situation or scenario, if you're fancy, but you're not engaged or stimulated or excited or entertained by anything that you're doing, or at the very least, all of your available options of what you can and can't do. You know, it's just like the reason why you just feel some of that mental blankness and you can truly hear the echo of your own thoughts because you're just spacing out. It's just because what presented in front of you is not appetizing mentally or emotionally, and you're just like, whatever, you know. I mean, this is so ridiculous. Do I have to explain what boredom is? The reason I laid that out is because there was times where I thought I was struggling and suffering from boredom, but it may have been actually not boredom, but just anhedonia. Because the thing is that I know there was times where I felt like I was bored, but I had plenty of things that, like, I remember there was a lot of times where I was bored during free time. And I think one thing I've learned over my little journey in recovery and trials and tribulations is I've been able to learn how to spend free time pretty well. You know, I have a lot of creative endeavors I like to do. Check out the podcast, Shoeless in South Dakota. And writing, check out, I don't know, just Google David Eisnagel writing if you'd like to see any of that. And, you know, other things. I love being outdoors, and I love, you know, any recreational sports or just, you know, things like that. I like reading, which is very time consuming if, you know, you have a lot of free time. But the thing is that I would have free time and I would be bored, but the truth was that I think it was just the fact that I wasn't going to like anything. Like, I didn't have, it's not that the options presented in front of me weren't, as I said, appetizing. It was that I lost all taste. I wasn't going to, there was nothing you could put in front of me that I was going to like. There was no opportunity, you could take me to Six Flags, and unless it was something as drastic as, like, seeing some great artifact of nature or skydiving, there was nothing that was going to get me to be unbored. And that it wasn't even boredom, it was anhedonia, because the way my brain, and this is, also a big symptom of PAWS, post-acute withdrawal syndrome, where it's so bullshit and it's so insidious. That is a word I use a lot to describe addiction because I think it fits properly. It's so insidious because you're not actually bored. You have anhedonia, to which you don't want to do anything, and nothing is going to be fun, entertaining, or engaging except drinking or using. And that's, that's what happens, where you get in this sort of like mental, like a fun famine, if you will, fun famine. But you get into just a drought of any sort of entertainment or stimuli, to where you think all I can do is drink or use. This is all that's available because I do not want to do anything else. Like, I've lost all pleasure in the things I used to enjoy, and I realize that. And the reason why I think it's important to differentiate the two between boredom and anhedonia is because, boredom, sometimes it's a matter of effort. Sometimes you just have to get off your butt, and I sound like my dad now, but sometimes you just have to push through to just try and get yourself active and doing something. Reach out, just, try to like sabotage your laziness, as I call it, to where you agree to do something or help somebody with something or sign up for something, so then you have to go even if you don't want to at the time. And then eventually you have, a good time where you find it worthwhile, or you're glad you went out, But in anhedonia, it's like doing that, and then when I actually go out, I'm just not engaged, man. I'm not there. And I think what you can do, because then the big question becomes, what am I going to do to remedy this? Because it sounds like a terrible state of being, and it is a terrible state of being. Well, like one thing, or like rather many things in recovery, there is a sense of adopting the idea of how temporary things are. That's this anhedonia. You're not going to lose all pleasure in things for the rest of your life. A big thing too is the idea, and this comes from practices of DBT or just the practice of mindfulness itself, is just sit with the sort of pain and the agony. I don't even think that's too strong of a word. The true agony of just that empty feeling of not enjoying things, examine it. I mean, I know that sounds like so stupid, like if the thing that bothers you, get more of it, or really feel it, put that pain into HD. Why not? I know that sounds stupid, but it is a good practice to, kind of get a healthy callus on the negative emotions and things that you feel. I don't even have to go over like how ubiquitous mindfulness is now, and for good reason, because of its usefulness. And I would say what helps me is even still doing those laziness, sabotage, or whatever you want to call them, to just get out and not be alone with yourself. Because at the very least, you can consider doing it like harm reduction, in a sense, where you're not just, if you have the anhedonia, if you just are not able to enjoy anything and you're stuck and you're so just kind of just miserable, at the very least, being around others, healthy people, being around them is better than just being by yourself. If you just sit there, depression and sadness and all that stuff is like a fungus. Like, it grows much more when it's just damp and in the dark. I don't know what the dampness is a metaphor for, but just in the dark, it will grow more. So it's important just to get out of your head, I guess, like a lot of things. And like most of this stuff, it could be said plainly, but it is simple, but it's not easy. And that's the big thing. So anyways, that's my little video for this week, this segment. Appreciate all the feedback I get in the comments. Like I said, I have the podcast. And the other thing, in the Shoeless in South Dakota network, I'm starting a weekly podcast. It's like mini episodes, about 30 minutes each, that are about my life and my musings on things that go beyond, sociological things, beyond just addiction and mental health and recovery. So if you want to test that out, it's called Dave on Ice, and wherever you find Shoeless in South Dakota on every major podcast player, you will find that as well too. Other than that, be well.